Good evening. Welcome to the National News Broadcast. I'm Kasumi Balachandra.
A very good evening indeed. I'm Charita Vinipurarachi. And let's move on to the headlines for tonight's news.
Government decides to maintain the operations of the East Container Terminal as a wholly owned container terminal of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Port Trade Union calls off the joint trade action. A growth in telecommunication and information technology sector. Drug racketeer Kibula L.A. Guna taken into custody in Tamil Nadu. The total number of recipients of the AstraZeneca vaccine surpasses the 100,000 milestone. International calls continue to increase for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi a day after the Myanmar army seized power in the country.
Moving on to those and other stories in detail. The government has decided to maintain the operations of the East Container Terminal as a wholly owned container terminal of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. The approval for the relevant cabinet paper was granted yesterday. With the decision of the government, all port trade unions decided to call off the joint trade union action today. The relevant Memorandum of Understanding between Sri Lanka, India and Japan for the development of the East Container Terminal of the Colombo Port was signed during the previous Good Governance government period. According to the agreement, the present government took steps to appoint a negotiating committee to evaluate an investment proposal submitted by an Indian investor. The Cabinet of Ministers granted approval for the relevant cabinet proposal on October 26th last year. The recommendations of the committee were submitted to the relevant Indian investor after presenting the relevant report to the President and the Prime Minister. However, the relevant Indian company had not agreed with the majority of the findings, which were favourable for Sri Lanka. Subsequently, the government decided to maintain the operations of the East Container Terminal as a wholly owned container terminal of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. The relevant cabinet proposal presented by the subject minister was approved at the cabinet meeting held yesterday. This cabinet paper consists of many proposals to develop the Colombo port as a competitive port in the region. The Cabinet of Ministers have granted approval to take necessary steps to construct and develop a West Container Terminal in the Colombo port. This decision was reached in accordance to the contents of the 58th page of the Vistas of Prosperity policy statement. Accordingly, the policy statement has indicated on the implementation of an international passenger terminal with the intention to increase the re-exporting container terminal quantity of the Colombo port and initiate the operations of the East Container Terminal, which is not in operation at present, and proceed with the construction of the rest of the terminal. The construction of the West Container Terminal will be initiated with the assistance of private investments. Several remarks were made in this regard during the media briefing held today to announce the cabinet decisions.
Just in view of the latest cabinet decision, what are the next steps? What would be the next step in terms of the East Terminal? Would the government be writing formally to India and Japan? How can you take us through the next steps involved in next steps arising from the decision that you have taken yesterday?
Those are, I think, procedure matters. As a matter of principle, the cabinet makes a decision on policy. The policy states as that the East Terminal will be administered and managed by the Ports Authority. That is that as of now.
In respect of the ECT, Minister of Ports mentioned in the cabinet paper submitted last night that it would be developed in 3 stages within 3 years in full.
That's fine. Now that there is a tripartite agreement, how would you proceed in abrogating that agreement? Would you negotiate with the 3 other 2 parties, or would you just make a statement, or would you issue a letter to them, or how are you going to have this divorce with the other 2 partners?
It will be dealt with the Ports Authority and the minister concerned and the foreign ministry will deal with it. Those details we cannot divulge at the moment.
Yeah, Minister, so you spoke of 3 years and the ECT being developed in 3 phases by the SLPA as per the cabinet decision yesterday. So I wanted to ask the estimated amount needed to develop the ECT was $700 million. So what is the plan to raise that kind of money, given the economic strain that Sri Lanka is under, also because of COVID? $700 million was the estimated sum to develop the ECT. Is there a rough idea where that might come from for the SLPA?
The SLPA is going to use their own funds as well as borrowed money from local commercial banks.
Following the approval granted for the Cabinet paper to hand over the operations of the East Container Terminal to the Sri Lanka Ports Authority as a wholly owned container terminal, the port trade unions decided to call off the joint trade union action this morning.
And meanwhile, the telecommunication and information technology sector has gained a remarkable growth in the country during the third quarter of the last year compared to the same quarter in the year 2019. This has been revealed in the National Accounts Estimate issued by the Department of Census and Statistics. The telecommunications service has gained 2.1% growth in the third quarter of the year 2020 in comparison to the same quarter of 2019. During this period, the growth gained by the telecommunications service field was at 16.5%. The total revenue of the sector was reported as 48 billion rupees. During the period, technological service in the country has gained 13.5% growth due to the distance learning program conducted for school children as well as work from home initiatives for state and private sector employees through online platforms. According to the National Accounts Estimate issued by the Department of Census and Statistics for the third quarter of the year 2020, the financial services sector in the country have achieved a growth of 12.3%. The distribution of financial services for the third quarter of 2020 under stable rates were recorded at 202,023 million rupees. The value of the loan advances in the same quarter has achieved a growth of 13.8%, while the value of the total deposits indicated a growth of 18.5%. Health services had achieved a growth of 4.6%, while real estate services has gained a growth of 3.1% in the third quarter of 2020. Following the first wave of the COVID-19 outbreak and normalization of the public life, wholesale and retail trade has achieved a considerable growth in this period. According to wholesale and retail traders, has gained a 2.1% and 2.9% growth respectively in the third quarter of 2020 compared to the same quarter of 2019.
The government has decided to continue with the fertilizer subsidy for paddy cultivation. Minister Mahindanand Alutgamage, speaking at a media briefing today, said that the cabinet approval has been granted to initiate the fertilizer subsidy program for other non-paddy crops based on specific quantities. Minister Mahindanand Alutgamage said that under the existing system, the fertilizer subsidy for non-paddy crops is being utilized by other parties in an inappropriate manner outside the intended farmers, making it difficult to meet the fertilizer requirements when required. He said that accordingly, a cabinet paper was presented with proposals to implement the fertilizer subsidy scheme for paddy in the same manner as at present, subject to a maximum of 2 hectares per season for 2 seasons per year. Also, he added that opportunity will be provided to purchase fertilizer up to a maximum of 5 hectares per year as per the quantities determined by the relevant research institutes for each non-paddy crops. He also said that cabinet approval has been granted to establish a company for carbonic fertilizer production in the country for the first time.
And let us move on to the world local update of the COVID-19 pandemic. The epidemiology unit says that AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine has already been administered to more than 100,000 people in the country under the COVID-19 inoculation program. The administration of vaccines was continued on today as well. The AstraZeneca vaccination was initiated on January 29th. A total of 36,396 persons received the vaccine yesterday. The COVID-19 vaccination program in Kurunegala district was conducted on today as well. Under the program, 800 personnel of health services received the AstraZeneca vaccine. The program was held at the Northwestern Health Services Director's office. The COVID-19 vaccination program was also conducted for the health services staff in rural hospitals of Yatiyantura Medical Health Officers Division. The number of COVID-19 recoveries in the country has increased up to 59,043. The percentage of fully recovered patients has increased to 90.36%. 9.15% COVID-19 patients are still undergoing treatments, which amount to 5,978. A total of 7,997 COVID-19 recoveries were reported in the country in the previous week. The country reported the highest COVID-19 recoveries recorded in a single day on January 28 after recording 1,869 recoveries. A total of 968 recoveries were reported today. Another 361 COVID-19 patients were identified in the island today. All patients have been identified as close contacts of Paddy COVID cluster. 13,392 PCR tests were conducted yesterday. Accordingly, the total number of PCR tests up to now has reached 1,737,419. Meanwhile, 7 COVID-19 related deaths were reported yesterday. The deceased have been identified as residents from Vattala, Nugegoda, Colombo 2, Udugampala, Polonnaruwa, Madavela and Gelio areas in the ages of 39, 69, 72, 73, 75 and 77 respectively. Steps have been taken to provide necessary air tickets for migrant workers registered with the Foreign Employment Bureau who are stranded in foreign countries unable to return to the country. Accordingly, the migrant workers should register with the Sri Lankan embassies established in respective countries in order to obtain air tickets. If not, they can submit their request by dialing 800-119-119 telephone number on the Foreign Relations Unit. Meanwhile, Minister Dimang De Silva has said that 30.4 million rupees have been allocated for the welfare of the migrant workers arriving in the country due to COVID-19 outbreak. Another batch of 320 Ukraine tourists arrived in the country today through the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport. In the meantime, another 353 foreign tourists returned to the Ukraine from 2 flights today. Deputy Director General of Health Services Dr. Hemantha Herath said the tourism industry has achieved great success under the bioprotective bubble initiative implemented following the reopening of the country for industrials for the industry.
And now the WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says the global number of new confirmed COVID-19 cases has registered declines for the third consecutive week in a row. Addressing its virtual event at headquarters in Geneva, he said that while many nations are still seeing infections increasing, it is nonetheless a piece of encouraging news. The WHO chief also urged countries across the world not to let down their guard at this critical junction and take precautions and keep preventive measures in place.
For the third week in a row, the number of new cases of COVID-19 reported globally fell last week. There are still many countries with increasing numbers of cases, but at the global level, this is encouraging news. It shows this virus can be controlled, even with the new variants in circulation. And it shows that if we keep going with the same proven public health measures, we can prevent infections and save lives. However, we have been here before. Over the past year, there have been moments in almost all countries when cases declined and governments opened up too quickly and individuals let down their guard only for the virus to come roaring back. As vaccines are rolled out, it's vital that all of us continue to take the precautions to keep ourselves and each other safe.
Remarks were also shared on the COVAX vaccine sharing program and the actual projection of the available COVID-19 doses for global distribution.
Over the weekend, the COVAX facility has looked at the available volumes, and then it's calculated for all of the participants in the COVAX facility, all 190 countries, what are what they call indicative allocations. So how much of that product should be available to those countries starting from late February and then running into March and right through the first half of the year.
We are still waiting to see the actual projection of how many doses will be available in February and March from the manufacturers, right? Because you will have seen there are some glitches in the manufacturing of the different vaccines at this stage, and there may be less volumes to be allocated. We'll know that in the next few weeks.
And meanwhile, the WHO technical lead for COVID-19, Maria Van Kerkhove, says that the World Health Organization team visiting China to explore the origins of the coronavirus is having productive talks with the Chinese counterpart. Van Kerkhove's comments came as a team investigation the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic arrived at an animal health facility in China's central city of Wuhan today, where the outbreak emerged in late 2019.
The team is on the ground, as you know, and there is quite a media coverage following them around. So you've seen some of the visits that they have made. They are having very productive discussions with Chinese counterparts, visiting different hospitals around Wuhan. They've had a very good visit to the market, seeing firsthand the stalls and walking through. And we had some good feedback from them of the importance of being able to physically walk through. They've also met with counterparts at the Wuhan CDC and other different levels of the Chinese Center for Disease Control. And they're having very good discussions. But as you know, the plans and the visits that they have provide detailed information, and all of this detailed information requires analysis, which is ongoing between the international team and the Chinese counterparts.
Top Democrats in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives filed a joint $1.9 trillion budget measure yesterday in a step toward bypassing Republicans on COVID-19 relief, even as President Joe Biden met with Republican senators who said they would press forward on a compromise effect.
Democrats in U.S. Congress filed a joint $1.9 trillion budget measure on Monday in a step toward bypassing Republicans on COVID-19 relief. That was just before President Joe Biden met with Republican senators Monday night at the White House. GOP Senator Susan Collins described the discussion as, quote, frank and useful, but told reporters there had been no breakthrough on a bipartisan bill.
I wouldn't say that we came together on a package tonight. No one expected that in a 2-hour meeting. But what we did agree to do is to follow up and talk further at the staff level and amongst ourselves and with the president and vice president on how we can continue to work together on this very important issue.
While the president has voiced a willingness to work with Republicans on a compromise effort, the White House has said they, quote, will not settle for a package that fails to meet the moment. Before the meeting, the top two Democrats in Congress, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, laid the groundwork for bypassing Republicans on COVID-19 relief, filing a joint budget measure with the Biden proposed price tag. With the Senate split 50-50 and Vice President Kamala Harris wielding the tie-breaking vote, Democrats could sidestep a 60-vote threshold and enact the coronavirus legislation with a simple majority in a procedure called reconciliation. If deployed, it would be the first flex by Democrats since winning razor-thin control of the Senate. For the Republicans, their proposed plan offers no assistance to state and local governments, one of the items that a Biden advisor described as a must-have. It also offers stimulus checks starting at $1,000, less than the $1,400 checks sought by Biden, and totals less than a third of the $1.9 trillion package.
And on a different note, the cabinet approval has been granted to manufacture 700 railway passenger coaches locally. It has been estimated that the requirement for railway passenger coaches is expected to increase up to 800 over the next 5 years. Existing railway passenger coaches are in different ages between 25 to 30 years. Accordingly, steps have been taken to renovate 140 existing railway passenger coaches. Also, 160 coaches are expected to arrive from India. The Ministry of Transport has indicated that 50% of the passenger coach requirement has to be approved expeditiously. The Industrial Dispute Act set to be amended to expedite the procedure of disciplinary inquiries or interdictions against the private sector employees. The relevant cabinet approval was granted in this regard. According to the amendment, a final disciplinary order will be issued within 6 months from the date of interdiction or an employee, and provisions to allow the employee to receive the half payment of the salary. Plans are underway to recommence the fuel oil trade by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. The relevant cabinet approval granted in this regard. The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval to reorganize the Prison Intelligence Unit. Accordingly, the present Prison Intelligence Unit will be reorganized as Sri Lanka Prison Emergency Response Strategic Force, enabling design identified specific duties. The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval to initiate a project on integrated management of forest, agriculture and tourism through community-based ecosystem approach. The project is expected to receive a grant of $3.34 million through the United Nations Development Programme. The 55th Annual Summit of the Asian Development Bank is set to take place in Sri Lanka next year. The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval for the proposal presented by the Prime Minister in order to enter into the relevant Memorandum of Understanding with the ADB to propose summit, which will be held from May 2nd to 5th next year, expecting a participation of 4,000 foreign delegates and media personnel. Cabinet approval has been granted to provide land plots for internally displaced families without lands and residing in welfare centres in Jaffna district. A methodology is set to be formulated to purchase land plots of approximately 10 to 20 purchases to be purchased from private owners and construct houses in these lands. The Cabinet approval has also been granted for the continuation of microfinance loan grant facility for the indebted public residing in northern and north central provinces. The relevant proposal was presented by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Accordingly, 292 million rupees have been allocated to northern provincial, while 250 million rupees for the north central province.
The attention has been directed on knowledge exchange programs in the agricultural and fisheries sectors between Sri Lanka and Vietnam. Outgoing Ambassador of Vietnam Pham Thi Ngoc met Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa at his residence in Vijayarama this morning. The ambassador voiced appreciation regarding the uninhibited support she received from the government throughout her tenure. She highlighted few areas of bilateral developments achieved during her time in Sri Lanka. Historically, both nations have shared a strong bond over Buddhism, Ambassador Pham Thi Ngoc, and now along with religious ties, both nations are also looking to strengthen other areas including trade relations. Both the Prime Minister and outgoing ambassador discussed strengthening and sharing of education and student exchange programs that are currently available. The Prime Minister wished the outgoing ambassador the very best in all her future endeavours and thanked her for the continued support and friendship of the leadership and people of Vietnam. Secretary to the Prime Minister Gamni Senrath was present at this meeting.
And meanwhile, a discussion on main issues related to mass media sector, including the participation of persons with disabilities into the national development process, as mentioned in the Vistas of Prosperity policy statement, was held at the Ministry of Mass Media today. Minister Kelly Rambukwella presided the meeting. Representatives of the national organizations for persons with disabilities took part in the meeting. During the discussion, the representatives said that the Ministry of Mass Media has a significant responsibility for the 1.8 million persons with disabilities in the country and requested to ensure that the fundamental rights of these community in accordance to Vistas of Prosperity policy statement. They pointed out that though the policy statement has indicated that all channels must be sign language during respective news bulletins, only one channel has followed the direction in this regard and requested to provide this opportunity through all channels in future. They also request to use sign language under the right to information of the hearing impaired persons during significant occasions, including President's address to the nation, National Independence Day celebrations, special news and broadcasting of election results. They also said that attention should be directed on persons with disabilities when providing job opportunities and pointed out that suitable job opportunities for them are available in many fields and sectors. In response, Minister Kelly Rambukwella said that all pledges as mentioned in the policy statement will be fulfilled by the government through any hindrances. The Ministry instructed Secretary to the Ministry of Mass Media to take necessary measures to resolve issues pertaining to the persons with disabilities, especially in the mass media field. The Minister also instructed the Ministry Secretary to take necessary steps to encounter incidents of alleged use of language through various media which is offensive to persons with disabilities.
The police have said that in parallel to the 73rd National Independence Day celebrations, the vehicular movement around the Colombo Independence Road will be limited from today onwards. Therefore, police media spokesman DIG Ajit Rohana has informed the motorists to use alternative routes. This year's Independence Day celebration is set to held under the theme A Brighter Tomorrow and a Prosperous Motherland. Relevant rehearsals for the upcoming Independence Day celebration were held at the Independence Square today as well. Parades of Triforces and motorcades as well as fighter jets and helicopters belonging to Sri Lanka Air Force are expected to take part in the Independence Day celebrations. A cultural pageant with the participation of more than 300 artists is also set to feature in the celebrations. More than 2,000 special guests are expected to take part in the ceremony, which is set to be held under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Media personnel taking part for the coverage of the Independence Day celebrations were directed to PCR and rapid antigen tests today. Minister Kelly Rambukwala said that all media coverage will be carried out under health protective guidelines and methodologies.
Sinnaya Gunasekaran alias Kibula L.A. Guna, a Lankan drug trafficker who is linked with the LTTE, along with his 3 associates, were arrested in Tamil Nadu. The Q branch of the Tamil Nadu arrested the suspect at the Chennai airport, according to Times of India news website. Notorious criminal Kimbula L.A. Guna is a wanted suspect in Sri Lanka, and international red notices have been issued over his arrest. They allegedly took part in the LTTE's failed attempt to eliminate then Lankan President Chandrika Kumaratunga in 1999. After that, he fled Sri Lanka and was living in Tamil Nadu with fake documents. With information obtained from suspect Kimbula L.A. Guna based on intelligence, Q branch team arrested Guna and his associates. All the 4 are being remanded. Central Investigations Bureau was able to apprehend organized criminal Stanley Fernando alias Kennedy. The police have indicated that the suspect is a renowned contract killer. Minister Sanath Veerasekara said that the suspects were taken into custody with a close association maintained between the Interpol, Indian intelligence divisions and intelligence agencies in Sri Lanka. And with that, we conclude tonight's news. Do it tomorrow at the very same time. Stay safe. Good night.
Good night.